And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. We've got a lot to talk about today. We're basically just going to be following one storm all the way across the country. It's the storm that's causing these winter storm warnings down here in Southern California. Already brought about a foot of snow to the Sierras. That's going to be moving into the center of the country. Before it parks itself over Kansas and Colorado and Nebraska, the first thing it's going to do is bring in some extreme wind gusts that are causing this red flag warning we see here in New Mexico. The National Weather Service is calling it a critical threat for wildfire, so we're going to dive into that because it's due to some 45 mile per hour wind gusts as that storm is pushing into this region, mixed with some warm temperatures, some low relative humidities, all the recipes for some fire danger. Then as that system gets into the middle of the country, that's where it's going to start to pull in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and then pull down some cold air from Canada, which is causing these other two warnings that you see on this map. So right there is the red flag warning in New Mexico. That's the fire threat. Up here in Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming, that's where right now it's a winter storm advisory because this storm is set to really start to move in Saturday and Sunday, but I'm guessing that's going to turn into a full-on winter storm warning because with all that cold air being pulled down and that moisture being pushed in, we're expected to get over a foot, in some places 2 feet, even more than 2 feet of snow in some locations throughout Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. And then on the other side of this system, where the temperatures are a bit warmer, but we're still bringing in that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, that's where we have the warnings for a flash flood threat. There's, right now, I believe it's listed as a marginal risk for severe weather, which means some severe thunderstorms, some hail, some lightning, and I even read in one report that there's an isolated risk for some tornadoes. So, a lot to talk about in this forecast because that's not even it. After that, it's going to go up into the Midwest and then the Northeast afterwards, and that's actually the biggest change in the forecast model runs so far. Now the Northeast is expecting to get a rather large amount of snowfall with this same storm, so we're following it all the way across the country. So I'm going to have to try to be extra concise today because there is a lot to talk about. If you're only interested in one of these regions, for example, SoCal or New Mexico or that snow forecast or the rain forecast or all the way up here in the Northeast, you can go down into the comments below where I put the timestamps and you should be able to click directly to the region you're interested in. So let's actually watch this storm as it goes across the country. First thing you'll notice is that one storm that's working its way through the Midwest today. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because it's already almost out of the United States up into Canada, and we've got plenty of stuff to talk about when it comes to this big storm. So right there you can see that's where it brought some rain and snow to parts of California. Here is where it starts to move into the center of the country. This is going to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Getting into Saturday is when you start to see that storm strengthen. That's where we start getting more moderate snowfall and heavier rainfall. Then the storm, as it continues to bring in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, you see that is what this is going to look like Saturday evening into Sunday, and then throughout most of the day on Sunday, we're getting heavy snowfall, 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour throughout Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and then that severe weather and heavy rainfall that we have stretching all the way down from Nebraska, all the way down to Texas. And that's going to move across the region almost like a wave, going through Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, and then the rest of the southeast. On the northern end, you see that snow work its way up into the Midwest. The big question up here is what the temperatures are going to be doing. If they're still 30 degrees above average temperatures like we have right now, then not as much snowfall for the Midwest. If that low is able to pull down some cold air, that's where we could get some snow in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And then the big change in the forecast, this is something that was not showing up yesterday, is what's going to happen as that low moves into the Northeast. Yesterday, Northeast was far too warm to be getting any snow. Now it looks like some of that cold air is going to be being pulled down. We'll have below freezing temperatures. So now we're actually expecting a large amount of snow, maybe 6 inches, 8 inches. We'll have to see the exact amounts and locations when we check out the local forecast. But right there you can see that brings snow to the northeast because it moves right off the coast there. That's right where it'd be pushing in moisture from the Atlantic and then also pulling down cold air. That explains why this could actually also turn into a major snowstorm for the northeast. So just to look at it one more time, because it's a rather remarkable storm. I don't know if remarkable is the right word, because there's certainly a lot of threats that are associated with it. But it starts over here in the west, it forms over the center of the country, brings heavy snow and heavy rain, moves through the Midwest, and then finally up into the northeast. So almost everybody is getting some aspect of this storm. To see it another way, you can see it turns into a giant cutoff low as it moves off of Southern California, and then that's just going to park itself over the center of the country for almost all of Saturday, all of Sunday, and then even working into Monday and Tuesday. So that's where the totals for the storm are going to be so large. It's not just moving through in 24 hours like some storms do. It's very slow moving before it finally goes up into the Midwest Tuesday and then into the Northeast on Tuesday evening into Wednesday. And then you might have noticed we have what looks to be another trough filling in behind that, possibly another storm for the Northwest moving through, but that's going to be a story for another day because we have plenty to talk about already. So just looking at the snapshot of where the heaviest rainfall is going to be, you can see we're going to pick up a little bit more down here in Southern California, but the real bullseye of that rainfall is here in Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and especially Missouri, where we're expected to get over 3 to 4 inches of rain. That's why we have that flash flood warning in place right there, and that's one of the key places I'm going to be watching when it comes to the severe weather and the different dangers that we have with this storm. When it comes to the snowfall, there's that little strip that's going through the Midwest already today, and then this major storm, as it starts pushing into the center of the country, you see it's going to first bring some snow to Nevada, Utah, Arizona, 6 to 8 inches in some of those locations, which is great news when it comes to the drought in the Southwest. But then where the snow really starts piling up is once it's moved directly over Colorado and Wyoming. That's again where it's starting to refuel its moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, pull down that cold air, and then that is quite a bullseye of snow. That shows large portions of Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, working into South Dakota, getting at least a foot of snow. In some locations, it's looking like that orange color, which could be 2 feet to even 3 feet of snow. And then you'll follow that all the way up into the Midwest, where Minnesota, Wisconsin get some snow, and then the big change in the forecast, which is, I paused there because I thought about the fact that this is most likely going to change again. By the time that snow works into the Northeast, that's Wednesday and Thursday next week, so I guarantee that's going to change again. But as of right now, this same storm that's going to be a major snowstorm for the center of the country looks like it can now also be a major snowstorm for the Northeast. But again, we'll have to watch the weather forecast models closely because that's a ways off in the forecast, and I guarantee that will change in time. So with that snowfall going through the Midwest today, the key factor about who's getting the snow has to do with these above average temperatures. You see we're about 30 to even 40 degrees above average throughout most of the Midwest, so that's why that little strip of snowfall going through today is really just there in Minnesota. And then you're going to watch those 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures move into the Northeast throughout the day today and then into Friday. Then after that, we shift to a more mild pattern until you start to see this low form over the center of the country. So that's right about working into Saturday and Sunday, where that large cutoff low is directly above Colorado and Nebraska, and you can actually see how it's pulling that warm air in from the Gulf of Mexico. And then on the other side, that's where it's going to be pulling that cold air down. So where you're in Missouri or Arkansas on the warm side of this low pressure, that's where you're 10 to 15 degrees above average. where you're on the left side of the low pressure, that's where you're 10 to 20 degrees below average. And it's exactly where we're getting our heavy snowfall in Wyoming and Colorado, and then our heavy rainfall in Missouri and Arkansas. So just seeing that another way, the low itself, this is now looking at Saturday, it's above Texas. This is when it hasn't totally formed yet. And then as we work into the day Sunday, that's where you start to see this process take effect. You can actually see those warm temperatures being pulled up right along that yellow line right there. That shows those warm temperatures being pulled into this low from the Gulf of Mexico. On the other side, you can see those cold temperatures being pulled down from colder states like Montana and South Dakota, and that's what's bringing those below freezing temperatures into Wyoming and Colorado. So I always show this graphic, but it just perfectly explains what's going on with the temperatures, and that's going to determine whether you're in the region that has the risk for flash flooding, or if you're in the region that might be getting 1 to 2 feet of snow. The other great way to look at this map is when it comes to the moisture. This is now showing humidity, and you can see where we have that dry air over New Mexico, where part of that fire threat is located, but then you can see that moist air flowing in right over Texas and Louisiana directly into that low. So it's where that moisture flows in and then mixes with that colder air, where it gets squeezed out almost like water out of a sponge over those locations. So the other aspect, I just briefly mentioned that fire aspect in New Mexico. The real reason for that are the extreme wind gusts that you're going to see filling in ahead of this storm. So right about there, this is Friday night into Saturday, before that low pressure system has parked itself over Kansas, it first moves in the form of extreme wind gusts. That's 40 to 45 miles per hour through New Mexico right there. So that's right where we have the fire threat associated with this storm. Now, one other thing to note on this map, if we go back a little bit, you can see throughout the day today, there's actually the same 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts working through the Midwest and then eventually into the Northeast. So when I show the fire danger map later in this video, you'll actually notice that there's some very high fire danger all the way up into the mid-Atlantic as well. Not as bad as this red flag warning that we see here in New Mexico though, where when you factor in all the different factors like temperature, winds, humidity, the drought, that's where I would say we have a critical threat for fire danger. If you can see over here in Virginia, working up almost all the way into Pennsylvania, that's where the other red flag warning is. So fire threat all the way on the other side of the country as well. But the big story is what's going on with that major storm as it goes across the country with that winter storm warning, first down here in Southern California, then it moves off, creates that fire threat here in New Mexico, and then once it starts bringing in the moisture and cold air, that's where we get the winter storm warnings in Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska. That's where there's the possibility of 1 to 2 to even 3 feet of snow. And then on the other side, we have the threat for severe weather and flash flooding throughout Kansas, Missouri, stretching into Illinois and even parts of Kentucky, where we have the potential for 3 to 4 inches of rain, some thunderstorms, some hail, some lightning, and even some isolated tornadoes. So lots going on with this storm. So I think the best thing to do is just dive into the individual regions to see what it's doing as it moves across the country. So we'll look at the west first because that's where this storm is right now. You can see it right above California, and then throughout the day today, even into working into Friday and Saturday, you'll slowly see that low start to move out of California. So until that happens, we'll continue to get some light rain and snow, especially down in Southern California, but for the most part, the bulk of this storm is behind us, especially up in Northern California, where looking out my window right now, it even looks like there's some sunshine peeking through, and the majority of that precipitation is done. So taking a look at California, you can see that rain and snow continuing down in Southern California, especially throughout the day today, and some parts of the Sierras will be able to pick up a little bit more snowfall. For the most part, though, that's not very much, not really anything compared to what we're going to be talking about later in this video. What you can also see though is all that snow spreading into parts of Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and then eventually into Colorado. So that's good news when it comes to the drought, and I'll show that map in a second. First, let's just look at that rainfall. Most of the rainfall on this map is going to be down here in Southern California. Looks like we could pick up another ½ inch to even another inch in almost this stretch all the way from Los Angeles down to San Diego. So that's some good news there. While you can see majority of NorCal is out of that precipitation. When it comes to snowfall, SoCal has the ability to pick up over a foot in that one little bullseye, but I would say the better thing to focus on this map is what's filling in to the rest of the region. Throughout Nevada, we're getting maybe 2 to 3 inches of snow. Parts of Utah and Arizona, though, could be in that region where we're able to get 6 to 9 inches of snow. So again, that's great news because much of this region is in severe to exceptional and extreme drought. So that's great to see a lot of that moisture being spread out throughout Nevada, Utah, Arizona, as well as more rain filling into Southern California where you can see we're still abnormally dry. So just taking a look at that rain in Southern California, right about now you can still see there's light rain from Los Angeles all the way down to SoCal. That's going to actually pick up a little bit throughout the day today. We're getting another little blast of energy as that storm moves directly over Southern California. So some more moderate rainfall, and then by about 10 p.m. on Thursday, that storm for the most part is gone. We're still getting some light rain and snow, but for the most part, the bulk of the storm is behind us at that point. So looking at the snowfall, closer look, it looks like on top of what we've already received, parts of the Central Coast will get another 0.1 to 0.3 inches, Los Angeles 0.4 inches, and then down in San Diego 0.6 inches. And then that stretch in what is the higher elevations, that's actually going to be where you're able to pick up some snowfall. Looks like throughout the Southern California mountains, widespread 3 to 5 inches, and then that one bullseye where it looks like we can pick up over a foot. So again, we have some winter storm warnings still in place there as that storm exits the region. For the most part, NorCal is out of that storm now. There will be some more moderate rain and snow throughout the day today for Southern California before that storm finally exits the region. Now, once it does exit the region, that's where it first shows up as extreme wind gusts throughout New Mexico. So before we get the winter storm warnings and the 2 feet of snowfall in Colorado or the possible flash flooding in Missouri, the first thing it's going to do is bring that wildfire threat to New Mexico. So that's the first thing that I want to talk about. If you want to see that another way, there's that cutoff low moving out of California, and then right there, it's before this low has moved over the center of the country where it's bringing all the precipitation. First, you can see how close those isobars are together. Where you see close isobars like that, you can basically think of it as a gradient. It's almost like a steep slope. So the steeper that slope is, the faster something is going to roll down it. In this case, the slope is the atmosphere, and what's rolling down it is the winds. So where those lines are closer together, that's where you can think of the atmosphere as steeper. There's a steeper pressure gradient, so that's where you get stronger wind gusts. So that is the key reason that we have that fire danger throughout New Mexico. Let's go to about right now. You can see the first little traces of those stronger wind gusts are already starting to show up. 25 mile per hour gusts. And then as we go throughout the day today, getting into 5 p.m., that's where some of those 35 to even 45 mile per hour wind gusts start to show up throughout the state. Then that's going to continue and then ease up throughout the hours tonight, but then pick back up again tomorrow morning at about 11 a.m. You see those 40 mile per hour wind gusts return and then actually pick back up throughout the day on Friday, getting up to 50 to even 55 mile per hour gusts at some times. Looks like that will continue into Saturday. So this fire danger is likely to continue for the next few days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, especially on the eastern parts of the state on Saturday. That's where the winds have shifted over, and you start to see those 57 mile per hour gusts all the way down there in the southeastern parts of the state. So that is one aspect of fire danger. That's possibly, or in my opinion, the biggest aspect of fire danger, because that means any little fire that starts can be rapidly spread by those extreme winds. It can also lead to spotting, where you pick up burning embers and sparks and then throw them out ahead of the blaze, and that it's just not good when it comes to wildfire. The other aspect that leads to wildfire danger are the temperatures. So let's look at the highs today. Looks like it's going to be warm. We're mid 70s to even high 70s in some places. So temperature wise today, that's certainly warm enough for fire danger to be a concern. Then tomorrow, it looks like we're in those mid to high 70s again, especially in the southern and eastern parts of the state, which is where that red flag warning and those extreme wind gusts were as well. Then as we look into Saturday, the good news there is that the temperatures will have cooled down a little bit. So even though we still have those 60 mile per hour wind gusts on the eastern side of the state, it looks like it's going to be a bit cooler. So that should allow that some of that fire danger risk to reduce. 1 second, I gotta plug my computer in. I got 1% battery. Wouldn't want to die in the middle of a live stream now, would we? So that's the good news there. Part of the reason for those cooling temperatures is that moisture being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico, and actually some of that cold air filling in. Actually, not the Gulf of Mexico. That doesn't explain the cooling temperatures. What explains it is as that low moves out of the region, you could think then you're on the back end of the low, where you have winds pulling down from the north. So that's bringing in some cold air down from Colorado. And you can actually see that cold air fill in as those winds continue to pull that down. I'll be able to show a map that explains that better later in the video. So another aspect of fire danger is the relative humidity. The drier the air is, the drier the fuels become. And it makes sense that if you've ever tried to start a campfire with a dry log or a moist log, it's much easier to start a fire with dry vegetation, and then it's going to burn much easier. And you can see that the relative humidity is about as low as it can get throughout much of New Mexico, and 5 to 10% relative humidity. So that's going to be drying out the fuels throughout the day today. And there's been dry air there in the past, which has been almost pre-drying out a lot of these fuels. That's going to continue all the way into Friday, where you see some relative humidities in the single digits, especially on the southwestern parts of the state. And then interesting to look into Saturday, where you actually do start to see some of that moisture move into the state. So looking at the effect that dry air has on the fuels, this shows the fuel moisture. And you can see that especially down here in southern New Mexico, that is one of the driest places in the entire country, where our fuels have 3 to 4% moisture. Even if you don't know the gauge of that, you can just see based on this color scale that that's about as dry as you're ever going to get. And then you can actually also see that we have dry fuels all the way up here in Virginia. Up here in Virginia, we have those dry fuels, and that's also where we have some of those strong wind gusts. So if we look at the fire danger map in a second, you'll actually also notice why we have that red flag warning up there as well. Again, I'm not focusing on that though, because I think the fire threat is much more critical for New Mexico. The other reason for that is the drought. That's another thing that gets plugged into these fire danger models. You can see that almost all of New Mexico in either severe or extreme drought. So all of those factors we've been talking about, winds, temperature, humidity, fuel moisture, drought, get plugged into the fire danger model and then spit out this image. This is where you can see where we saw a lot of those factors combining, especially down in southwestern New Mexico. That's where we have very high to extreme fire danger. And National Weather Service called it a critical risk for wildfire. But then you can also see all the way up stretching into the mid-Atlantic, where we saw some of those dry fuels and extreme wind gusts. That's where we have some fire weather concern as well with that red flag warning. So that's the fire danger right there. for New Mexico. Then after that moves through, so that's caused as that low pressure system starts to move through. This will actually show it better as it fully moves through into the center of the country. That's where you can see these winds shift direction and actually start to pull in some of that cool air instead of pulling in the warm air. So that's what I was trying to explain earlier. So then that low is going to move into the center of the country, and then that's where we shift out of the fire danger concern and start shifting into the winter storm warning and the flash flood and the severe weather concern. Because it's at this point we start pulling in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, pulling that cold air down into Colorado. Seeing that another way, you can see on this map as it starts to form in the center of the country, we start to get that snow in Colorado and that heavy rain building throughout Kansas, Oklahoma, and then spreading out into Missouri and Arkansas. So there's some periods on this map where we're getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour of snowfall in Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska, and then 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour of rainfall through Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. So where we have that heavy snowfall, that's where we could be picking up 2 to 3 feet of snow. And then where we have that heavy rainfall, that's where we have the flash flood threat and the severe weather threat, possibility of some thunderstorms, hail, lightning, and even some isolated tornadoes are possible. So looking at that another way, what's causing this? I'll actually back up. You can see that low move into the center of the country right there. At that point, it's right above Kansas. This is after it's worked through New Mexico and caused that wildfire threat down there. At this point, now we're shifting our gaze to the precipitation. So you can see it's bringing in that warm air directly into Oklahoma all the way up into Kansas and then pulling that cold air down on the left side of the low into Wyoming and Colorado. So where you have warm air, that's where you're getting rain. Where you have cold air, that's where you're getting snow. Now you can also see on this map what this low is doing with humidity. There's all that dry air that we were talking about in New Mexico, but then to the right of that, you can see how this low is pulling in that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. So if the low wasn't doing this, there'd be no moisture for it to drop that 2 feet of snow or that 5 inches of rain. It's because of the Gulf of Mexico that it's almost refueling its moisture tank, which allows more of that precipitation to fall because it dropped a lot of its Pacific moisture directly over California. We got about a foot of snow in the Sierras and then more snow throughout Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. At that point, it's almost dried out, and you can actually see how that works. When it went through California, we had some decent rain and snow. Then it almost looks like it dries out at this point. We're not seeing that much snow or that much rain. And then as it moves into the center of the country and starts to refuel from the Gulf of Mexico, that's where you see that heavy precipitation return again. So taking a closer look at that, at this point, that's where there's not that much moisture left in the system. We're just starting to bring in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. You can see it almost trying to form right here. This is where the system is still just rather weak, slowly forming over these states. Then, as the isobars around that low start to tighten up, that's when the storm gets stronger. That's going to happen Friday into Saturday into Sunday, where you start to see that heavy snow build in to Colorado, Wyoming, parts of Nebraska, and then that heavy rain build into Kansas and Oklahoma. And then what you're going to notice is that the storm gets even more organized in where it's bringing that snow and rain. You start to see that heavier rain up here in Nebraska and South Dakota and Wyoming, and then this strong strip of heavy rain and severe weather that you're then going to see move across the region almost like a wave. So moving back right there, that's where it's slowly starting to form, and then it forms this strip, and then it moves through Missouri, Arkansas, almost like a wave. So that's where we're getting the majority of our heavy rainfall for parts of Missouri. We're looking at the rainfall map. That is where we're expected to get the most rain. Parts of southern Missouri expected to get over 5 to 6 inches of rain with that severe heavy rainfall as it comes through. But then parts of Kansas, where we saw that heavy rainfall as well, getting 2 to 4 inches. So even though flash flood warning wasn't stretching into this part of the state, I would imagine that they'll give it that flash flood warning at some point in the future. But again, right there in Missouri, that's the key spot when it comes to that flash flood warning, because we're getting 5 to 6 inches of rain. What happens there is when you get that much rain over that short of a period, typically rain can just soak into the soils. When you get more than 4 inches, now your soils become saturated and they can't absorb any more of that rainfall, so then it just runs across the surface in the form of flooding. So then we can also look at where the heaviest snowfall is filling in. You can see that bullseye up there in Wyoming, where there's one area that could be getting over 30 inches of snow. Then down here in Colorado, it looks like we're between 1 to 2 feet for the most part. That's actually a little bit less than yesterday's model was showing, but not less by much. You can see there's still large parts of the state that are getting 1 to 2 feet of snow, and then stretching into Nebraska as well. So again, that gives you an idea of the warnings we have in place. When it first comes in, we have that red flag warning down in New Mexico, where we have the fire threat, where we start to get that 4 to 5 inches of rain, especially in Missouri. That's where we have the flash flood threat. And then where we have the 1 to 2 feet of snow, that's where we have the winter storm advisories, which I'm guessing will turn into winter storm warnings in the next couple of days. So taking a closer look at that flash flood threat through Missouri, you'll notice that a lot of that rain has already started. So when thinking back to what I was talking about with the soils, how they become saturated, the bulk of the storm hasn't even formed yet, and much of the state is already getting some heavy rainfall and possibly even some severe weather. So that's continuing today into Friday into Saturday, and then that's not even the real bulk of the storm. That shows up 7 p.m. on Sunday. That's where we get this strip of what will most likely be a series of thunderstorms, severe weather. That's most likely going to lead to some lightning, some hail, hopefully not any tornadoes, and then that is going to move across the state. So that's 7 p.m. on Sunday to 1 a.m. Monday to about 7 a.m. on Monday. It's moved out of Missouri. So it's almost like this storm is just slowly, constantly forming over Missouri, constant heavy rainfall, and then it's almost like that climax at the end as this storm looks to be the strongest as it moves through the state Sunday into early Monday morning. So with all that, again, we're just slowly adding on to our rainfall totals for a long period of time, and then when that heavy rainfall goes through, that's where we really start to add on to our totals, bringing some parts of the southern parts of the state up to 5 to 6 inches. And then when we look at the snowfall side of this forecast, this is on the colder side of the low pressure system, where our temperatures are below freezing. That precipitation will instead be falling in the form of snow. And again, just like Missouri, you can see even throughout the day today, working into Friday, there are periods where we're still picking up light snowfall before the real system even arrives. So that's just going to slowly add up to the totals that you'll end up receiving overall. Then we start to see this really start to strengthen at about 11 a.m. on Saturday, and then getting into 5 p.m. Saturday, you start to see that more moderate snowfall build into the northeastern parts of the state. And then throughout the day Sunday, that's where we just continue to get snowfall and more snowfall until it's finally gone by 12 p.m. on Monday. So let's just look at where the bulk of this storm seems to be coming in. It looks like it really strengthens about 11 a.m. on Saturday. Then I would say that's the strongest part of the system, 5 p.m. Saturday, working into Saturday night, and then early Sunday morning before it seems to be continuing throughout the day Sunday and then eventually exiting the region. So looking at the snowfall forecast for Colorado, we'll just click all the way through because it seems like it's just constantly adding more and more totals to what we're getting. Looks like southern parts of the state are in that 2 to 4 inch range, and then we have this strip on the western part of the state that's well It's not exactly a strip, it's actually a large region of the western part of the state that's over a foot. And then up there in the northeastern parts of Colorado, remember that's where we saw the strongest snowfall rates coming in. So it makes sense that that's where we're going to have the largest snowfall accumulations. Colorado Springs looks like you could get up to 14 inches, Castle Rock 2 feet, Denver's looking like 1.5 feet, and then you have that stretch going all the way up all the way into Wyoming, where you're getting at least 1 foot, possibly even 2 feet of snow. Now, one thing I'll say about this snowfall forecast is we've been looking at these models all week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and now today, and this has stayed relatively constant throughout the entire week. There's been some changes to the exact inches that we're expecting for different locations, but overall, the models have stayed fairly consistent with what they're predicting. So what that tells me is that there's a good chance that this is actually going to end up happening, because the models seem to be fairly confident with this ending up being a major snowstorm, especially here in Colorado, where we see 1 to 2 feet of snow. And again, I would say that is likely to happen at this point. So let's continue to follow this storm as it moves through. Started in Southern California throughout the day today, brings that fire threat to New Mexico, then the 1 to 2 feet of snow to Colorado, then the 4 to 6 inches of rain to Missouri, and then it's going to move up into the Midwest. So an interesting thing to think about right here is just taking a look at this map. This is a very strange weather map. It almost looks like there's a giant ridge over the entire center of the country, and then we have this bullseye of just a massive cut-off low pressure system. So what that means is that some of our temperatures up here in the Midwest are actually going to be warmer than if this was just a trough building in. So what that's going to affect is where you're getting your snowfall. So throughout our Midwest forecast, that's going to be the key thing we're thinking about, is where those temperatures are going to be cold enough to be getting snowfall by the time that low moves into the Midwest. So just seeing that another way, you can see right now much of the Midwest is 30 to 40 degrees above average temperatures. Now a lot of that is going to be cleared out with the first little system we have moving through today. So you can actually see that on this map. It's this little bump right here. That's a little low pressure system bringing some snow to Minnesota today. I'm purposely not spending too much time on that because we certainly have a lot to talk about today. But what that's going to do is on the back end of that, it's actually going to have that cold front. You can actually see the cold front on this map right there. There's the low pressure system. You could think of the counterclockwise winds around it. So right here, that's where you're pushing in some cold air. That's your cold front. So that cold air is going to push out some of those 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures and push them into the northeast, where into this afternoon and into tomorrow, we'll have those 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures. Now behind that cold front, the Midwest will change back to more mild temperatures. But then something to think about is as this storm is forming, that's going to be about Saturday into Sunday, you can perfectly see that cold front right there coming off of the low pressure system as it's above Kansas and Nebraska. At this point, remember this is where there's that low pressure system in the center of the country. Let's look at the map again. Just clicking through right about there. That matches up with this almost perfectly. So right about there, that's where you're bringing that warm air into the low, bringing that cold air down into Colorado. But throughout much of the center parts of the country, it looks like we have this giant ridge in place. So the Midwest at this point is going to be back to those 10 to 15 degree above average temperatures. The real question is what kind of temperatures we're going to have when the low moves through itself, because that's going to determine where you get snowfall. You can see exactly how this works in the forecast for earlier this morning, where Minnesota was out of those 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures, so they were able to pick up some snowfall, while the rest of the Midwest was just getting rainfall. So let's see, as this major storm forms over the center of the country, as it moves in, it looks like There will be sufficient cold air for Minnesota and Wisconsin to pick up some of that snow, but majority of the Midwest looks to be too warm to be getting a lot of that snow. And again, it's because of that overall ridge that's causing those above average temperatures. So it looks like Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio look to be in that rainfall when that system comes through. So just seeing that in a closer view, I'm just going to skip over that one going through today. That one's basically gone. We're going to start to see this push in as we get into Sunday and Monday. And you'll notice much of the Midwest is in the rainfall. Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, southern parts of Michigan. Whereas where we have that colder air, that's where Minnesota, Wisconsin, parts of Iowa are able to pick up that snowfall as the system goes through. And then on the back end of it, it looks like we're going to be picking up some lighter snowfall throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin. So there's that strip that we're picking up today. Another 4 to 6 inches to fall as that one goes through. And then with the next system that goes through, that's what our totals will be by about this time next week. You can see parts of Minnesota getting up to 8 to 10 inches of snow. Parts of Wisconsin are in that 3 to 5 inch range. And then here in Michigan, we're in that 1 to 2 inch range. I think Michigan is going to be the key place to look at when it comes to this snowfall forecast, because that's where there's going to be the question of whether the temperatures are cold enough for that precipitation to fall as snow. And that's also an area where the models keep going back and forth on what they're saying. 2 days ago, Michigan was getting 6 to 10 inches of snow as a bunch of cold air was pulled into the region. Now, it looks like we're just about 1 to 2 inches of snow, and much of the southern parts of the state are just getting rainfall. So the key place I want to look at in the Midwest for our local forecast is Minnesota, because that was clearly the place that has the highest confidence of this snowfall actually happening, and then when it does happen, appears to be the largest amount. So you can see that snowfall that came through early this morning, 6 a.m., it was the last traces of it, and then it's gone most likely by the time you're watching this video. So not worried too much there. Looks like we're clear most of Friday, Saturday, and then 7 a.m. Sunday, you start to see the first little traces of this system as it moves in. It doesn't really move in until about 7 a.m. on Monday, though. Again, that's the theme for the storm. It's a very slow mover. That's why as it moves across the country, even though some of our rates aren't all that impressive at times, it's so slow moving that it's able to just continue to add on to the totals. So that's 7 a.m. Monday, we're starting to get that snow in parts of southern Minnesota. And then by 1 p.m. Monday, we're building in some moderate snow. That's 0.1 to 0.2 inches per hour. So it's not the extreme snowfall we're seeing in parts of Nebraska at times, but snowfall nonetheless. And that looks to be building through Minnesota and Wisconsin all the way through the day Monday. And then we still get some light snowfall as that system moves out as we work into the day Tuesday. So looking at the totals, that's what we're getting throughout the day today, or we already got this morning. That's about 4 to 6 inches here in the western parts of the state, 6 to 8 inches up here in the northern parts of the state. So one thing to think about is as I continue to click onto this map, we're adding on to these totals. So you have to add what we're getting with the next system on top of that. Looks like in total, by about this time next week, large portions of basically all of Minnesota has picked up some snow. Western parts of the state, especially southwestern, are in that 8 to 10 inch range, and then the northeastern parts of the state look to be in that 8 to 10 inch range as well. And then down here in Wisconsin, looks like we're more 2 to 4 inches. So again, that's all due to what our temperatures are doing. So let's actually look at our temperatures in the Midwest as this storm comes through. It looks like you'll see it creeping up into Illinois in a second here. At that point, you can see that much of Minnesota and Wisconsin are still below freezing, but it's going to be close. You can see a lot of these temperatures are right about the freezing line, which means just a little change in this forecast can push you right into that above freezing category where you're getting rainfall instead of snowfall. That's one of the closest things I'm watching in this forecast. As of right now, though, you can see Minnesota, Wisconsin, northern parts of Michigan expected to be below freezing, which you can tell by that blue color as that low pressure system moves through. So that almost perfectly matches where we were getting that snowfall as that low moves through. And then as it continues to go through, then that overall ridge will just dominate over the region, and we'll be back to some more mild temperatures throughout the region. So again, key thing I'm watching there though is where those below freezing temperatures will be, because that will depend on where we get the snow. So actually, before we look at that map, let's just continue to follow this as it moves across into the northeast, because this is the thing that has changed more than anything else in this entire forecast that we're talking about today. So there you see the low moving into the northeast, and originally it was just moving up into Canada, and the northeast was basically missing out on this storm entirely. And because it was moving up into Canada, we were on the southern end of the low where we're pulling in warm air, so the northeast was just getting rain. Now it looks like it's jumping off the coast right here. So why that's important is because as that stays off the coast, you'll notice on the left side of the low, we're able to bring some of that cold air down, which will bring those below freezing temperatures into the northeast. And then on the right side, we're going to be pushing in that moisture. So this now is forecasted to become a nor'easter. This is something that was not in the original forecast. So just like what we were talking about earlier, where it's bringing the moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico and the cold air down from Canada and bringing all that snowfall to Colorado, it's doing a very similar thing as it goes up through the northeast. That's where we're bringing in some moisture from the Atlantic, pulling down some cold air from Canada, and then that can combine to actually what looks to become a major snowstorm for the northeast. Again, I purposely saved this for the end of the video when we had some extra time, because I guarantee that this forecast will change. I mean, you've seen how much it changed just in the last day. Yesterday, that low was going into Canada. We were above freezing in the northeast, and we were getting rainfall. Now it looks like it's jumping off the coast, and it's going to be below freezing, and as you'll see in a second, it looks like we're getting a large amount of snowfall. So because that's a ways off in the forecast, that's just something we'll have to continue to watch every single day. But looking at it another way, there's that storm as it forms. It's in the center of the country. There's where it was going to go straight up into Canada, and now it looks like it turns into this little bump and jumps off the coast here in the northeast. Now behind that, you'll notice there's another trough, but that's way far out in the forecast, so I won't even mention that as of right now. So just looking at this as it goes through, not much for the next few days, maybe some scattered rain and snow working throughout this weekend. And then this system appears to be showing up early Tuesday morning, maybe about 7 a.m. on Tuesday where you're commuting to work. It first shows up as ice and rain, and that's because it hasn't been able to pull down some of those cold temperatures yet. So at this point, this is something I'll definitely be talking about Monday morning on my Monday morning forecast, because it looks like some ice could be building in. Now, once that low is able to pull down some of those cold temperatures, that's where we start to get some snowfall. Looks like what could be some heavy snowfall throughout New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and then heavy rainfall working down into parts of Virginia and most likely North Carolina as well. So then at this point, this is where the low starts to jump off of the coast. And you can see it right there. The question, and really the big question when we're talking about how much snow we'll get, is how long this low stays along the coast and how close to the coast it is. The closer it stays to the coast and the longer it stays along the coast, the more snowfall we get, because that's more moisture pulling in and more cold air pulling down. So you see that low as it moves out of the region, we end up picking up what looks to be a large amount of snowfall. To actually see that snowfall as it builds in, there's just what will fall over the weekend, just an inch or two up in upper parts of New England. As this system goes through, you can see it's going to be, or at least, I shouldn't say it's going to be, because I guarantee the forecast models are going to change. But as of right now, this is what's forecasted. Through Pennsylvania and New Jersey, we have that bullseye of 6 to 8 inches of snow. In parts of New York, it looks like we're getting 6 to 10 inches. And then in upper New England, that's where we're going to be getting the most of this heavy snowfall. That's where large parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, in that 8 to 10 inch range, and then even some places with the possibility to get up over a foot. So let's just take a more local look to check out the exact timing of this system as it comes in. You can see not a whole lot in the forecast until all the way into 8 a.m. on Tuesday. Then at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, this storm has officially moved in to lower New England, parts of eastern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, southern parts of New York, getting that heavy snowfall 2 p.m. on Tuesday. But something you'll notice is it's a quick mover. As of right now, it doesn't have it just hanging out along the coast. It looks like it moves through fast because by 8 p.m. Tuesday, it's already moved up into Massachusetts and then all the way up into upper New England by about 2 a.m. on Wednesday. There's the low itself along the coast, but it's where that combination of moisture and cold air is where we're actually getting that snowfall. So let's look at the total snowfall as that goes through. Quick little blast as it goes through it. And I purposely clicked through quick because the storm itself moves through relatively quick. It's here and gone within about 12 hours. But as it moves through, looks like large parts of eastern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey picking up that 6 inches. New York City, 5 inches. Philadelphia, 4 inches. Then Massachusetts in that more of that 2 to 4 inch range. Boston, you're at about 4 inches as of right now. So again, you saw it move up into upper New England where, again, we do have some areas throughout the next few days, throughout the weekend, where we are picking up some light snow. Not purposely not spending too much time on that because I think the next system coming through is the bigger story. Looks like for upper New England, that could start to come in at about 8 p.m. on Tuesday. Almost all of Vermont and New Hampshire covered in that snow. And then it spreads out into Maine as we get into 2 a.m. on Wednesday and then 8 a.m. on Wednesday, where we'll see it cover all of Maine by 8 p.m. on Wednesday. So there's, I would say, the story for lower New England is that it moves through really fast and it's in a quick blast where we get, just looking through, it goes through in a quick blast and it's heavy snowfall as it moves through. I think it's a different story for upper New England. It seems like it's lighter snowfall, but it remains for a longer period of time. So for that reason, our totals are actually going to appear even larger than many of those places where we had the heavier snowfall rates. So because we're picking up light snowfall for a long period of time, our overall totals are going to be rather large throughout Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Looks like there's almost the entire region is in those 6 to 8 inch category, and then some little bullseyes where we're getting 10 inches to even a foot of snow. The key thing that I'll leave you with that storm though is that is a ways off in the forecast. I guarantee this weather forecast will change. The question is how it will change. So we'll continue to look at these forecast models every single day until this storm has actually arrived. So we talked about a lot throughout this weather forecast today. We basically followed the same storm as it moved across the entire country. It first moved through California, bringing a foot of snow to the Sierras, and then it'll continue to bring some rain and snow to Southern California throughout the day today and into tomorrow. Then, as it starts to move across the country, it first brings some snow to Nevada, Utah, Arizona, but then it's going to bring some extreme wind gusts to New Mexico. That's going to be about 45 mile per hour wind gusts that are going to be continuing both today and tomorrow as that system moves into the middle of the country. Those extreme wind gusts are combined with temperatures in the mid to high 70s, relative humidity in the single digits, fuel moisture is critically dry, and an extreme drought, which is why there is a critical threat for wildfire in New Mexico. Now, after that, it is going to park itself in the middle of the country for what seems to be all of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. At that point, That's where we start to bring in all that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and then that cold air down from Canada. That's going to combine to form what looks to be a major and significant winter storm that has the potential to bring 1 foot to 2 feet of snow to large portions of Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska, with some locations even in that 2 to 3 foot range. Now, on the warmer side of this system, that's where we're going to be getting the heavy rainfall and the severe weather. That's where there's the threat for some thunderstorms, some hail, some lightning, even, unfortunately, the possibility of some isolated tornadoes. So right there, as it moves through Missouri and Arkansas, you can see that band of heavy rainfall. Total, lower Missouri seems to be getting 4 to 6 inches of rainfall, so that's one of our key areas when it comes to the flash flood warning. And then we followed it as it moved all the way up into the Midwest, bringing some snow to Minnesota and Wisconsin. Again, the key thing we're going to have to watch for there is where we are below freezing or above freezing, because right now it looks like we're right on the border, so just a little change in the weather forecast could completely change the snowfall forecast for the Midwest. Then in the biggest change to the forecast was what's happening as this storm goes through the Northeast. Originally, it was just going to jump up into Canada. Northeast was going to have warm air and rainfall. Now, that low seems to be going directly through the Northeast and even off the coast of the Northeast, which at some points seems to be bringing heavy snowfall to parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and then eventually up into upper New England, where there are some possibilities of picking up 8 to 10 inches of snow overall with that system before it's finally gone and moved out of the United States. And then after that, it looks like the US should be getting a nice break from all this extreme weather after that. Looks like by about this time next week, after that storm has cleared out, it's taken all the energy with it, and almost all of the US appears to be out of precipitation towards about this time next week. So even though we do have a lot of warnings in place right now, even though we have that wildfire threat in New Mexico, the winter storm warnings through Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, the flash flood warnings and the severe weather throughout Missouri and what will most likely be much of the Southeast as well, it's not going to last for all that long. And it looks like farther out in the forecast, we'll have some clearing and the extreme weather will give us a bit of a break. So again, just one last look at the warnings map. There's those winter storm warnings in Southern California, that red flag warning in New Mexico. We actually also have that red flag warning in Virginia stretching up into the mid-Atlantic, where we also saw some of those warm temperatures, some of that moisture, or the lack of moisture, and then some of those extreme wind gusts. So there's actually a fire threat all the way up into the mid-Atlantic as well. Didn't spend as much time there because the threat looks a lot worse for New Mexico, because a lot more of those factors were combining at the same time. And then the key thing that we're going to be following as this storm continues to develop, and especially in tomorrow's forecast, is what ends up happening here in Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska with that snowfall. If we do end up getting 1 foot to 3 feet of snow, and then what happens here in Missouri and Kansas, even stretching into parts of Illinois and Kentucky, where there's the potential for 4 to 5 inches of rain, which unfortunately can lead to some flash floods. So hopefully this video was helpful and you were able to learn something about what's going on in the weather today and throughout the next few days. I'll be back tomorrow where we'll continue to follow this storm as it develops and moves across the country. And thank you very much to everyone who did the super chats. I'm very grateful for you guys' generosity. So everyone, have a great day and thanks for watching.